Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode number 23 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. You might notice that I'm in a different habitat, different setting. I'm actually in the midst of traveling right now, and within the next 24 hours, I will be flying overseas to the United Arab Emirates. I do have my first chess event of the year coming up in the town of Fujairah, a town, city. I've never been there before, so I actually don't know how big of a place it is. But I'll be competing in a 2-day event. First day will be a puzzle solving competition, and then the next day will be a blitz competition. I'll leave more information below if you're interested about learning more. So I do want to note that my streaming schedule and my YouTube upload schedule will be a little bit more sporadic for the coming days. So I do appreciate everyone's patience, but I do hope to make content while I'm traveling. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you enjoy the speedrun. Coming into today, I was rated 1205, had a lot of really instructive games, especially in the openings. I think there's a lot of lessons to take away, and I hope you enjoy the episode. And first opponent playing RTS Cookie. I'll play e4. And we have a king's pawn, knight of 3. I've had this position many times throughout the series, from both colors, actually. Now, knight f6 is the start of the two knights defense, and there's a few moves that white can play here. Knight g5 is kind of the start of the fried liver, if I want to go into that. There's pawn d3, which is the most solid move. Knight c3 would walk into the center fork trick, so I don't want to do that. Yeah, what do I want to do? Let's go for a fried liver, knight g5. We'll see how well my opponent is prepared here. D5 is the best move. Take on d5. Now the true fried liver is after knight takes d5. There's a move knight takes f7. But my opponent's going for a pretty tricky line, which I sometimes like to play from the black side. This move knight d4. And there's a really cool trap here that white could walk into if I play d6. There's a long variation which ends, I think, around move 10 or 15 with white getting mated. I'm not going to go into that, but I'll show it after the game. I have studied this position before, and I do know the best move is pawn c3, trying to exploit the knight on d4. So this is a nice move to put the pressure on, and black does kind of have to know what to do here to not be in trouble. Of course, the knight can move. The only safe square is knight f5, which I think is playable. But the best move, as far as I know, is pawn b5. So we'll see what my opponent comes up with here. Maybe taking is also playable to counterattack the knight, although taking I'd probably wind up material. We do see pawn b5. And now, it's a weird situation, because if I take the knight, I lose the bishop, and then it just becomes a very strange pawn structure. But I'm going to play the move bishop to f1, and this is still part of my opening preparation. It looks ridiculous, having recently developed the bishop to move it all the way back to its starting square. But the point of this move is I'm keeping the tack on the knight. I didn't move to e2 because that would allow knight takes e2. And I didn't move to d3 because that would allow bishop f5, which is a nice resource. So from f1, I'm putting the bishop on a square where it can't really be exploited, and I'm keeping the tack against the b5 pawn. And meanwhile, the knight's still attacked, and if it moves, then I'm going to take the pawn with check. So yeah, black still is in a small predicament. Now, most players, especially at this rating level, won't know this line with c3 followed by bishop f1. So I'm not surprised that my opponent is taking time here to try and figure out what to do. I'm pretty sure there is some famous game. Bobby Fischer had white from this position. I believe he was playing in the simul, or he was giving the simul, and he had famously lost within 15 moves. It can still be tricky for white if black knows what to do. I'm pretty sure the best move is knight takes d5. There was a time a few years ago, I gave a lecture for the St. Louis Chess Club on this exact variation. I'm pretty sure I showed the Bobby Fischer game. So if I can dig up the link to that lecture, I'll link it below. But yeah, it's been a long time since I actually looked at these lines in depth. And it's possible it's the first time for my opponent running into this exact line. There's been so many games in this series where I've been the one taking time early, sometimes to explain things, sometimes because I'm confused early on and trying to figure out the best path forward. But yeah, I feel like this game is going to be a very big opening lesson, and I'll definitely want to take the time afterwards to explain some of the ideas which I can't explain in this position. So we see bishop g4, which is a counterattack. It's not a move I've seen before, so this is kind of my first moment where I'm on my own. My first impression is just to play pawn f3, and I don't think there's any other move to even consider here. Like knight f3 is just a big concession. Meanwhile, the queen has no good squares. Bishop e2 would get the queen trapped. So let's go for pawn f3. This is usually not a move you want to play early in the game because it weakens the king. But here it's very much justified. Saving my queen, attacking the bishop. The knight is still attacked. b5 is still a target. And yeah, with two minor pieces attacked in black's position, it does look like I'm going to be winning material here. We see queen takes d5, so opponent is giving me the option which piece to capture. I think both moves are probably fine. I'm a bit more inclined to take the knight first, because then, like, assuming black will save the bishop, then I can take the pawn. Maybe that looks strange to allow queen takes pawn to attack the king and the knight, but then I'll have queen e2, which will likely force a queen trade. So yeah, let's go ahead and take. I guess it is possible black can take back, which would counterattack the knight. But I think in all these lines, I'm going to be up a piece in the end. And it's just a matter of making sure that black doesn't have any compensation, really. I just have to make sure my king is going to be safe when the center opens up. Okay, we see queen takes d4. So this actually gives me some options. I could take on b5 with check or take the bishop right away. If I take on b5, then the bishop can save itself with bishop d7. So yeah, let's just win more material. I'm not scared of queen e4, although I am scared of queen f2, which is a checkmate threat. But there's definitely ways to deal with that. And maybe the first thing I can do is take on b5 with check. Yeah, let's go for this. Black can't deliver checkmate when the black king is attacked. And I think very likely next move I'll play something like queen f3 or queen e2 or rook f1. All of these moves will prevent checkmate. Of course, depending where the black king moves to, like king d8, knight takes f7 will be possible. So king e7 is played. And I really like this move queen f3 because not only does it defend against queen f2, but it attacks the rook and it attacks f7. On top of that, I'm up a knight and a bishop, I guess, for a pawn. So things are going very well here. This is why it pays off to be prepared in the opening. Especially to be prepared against kind of an offbeat but tricky variation. So yeah, I'm not sure what black should do here. Like it's so difficult to have the rook and pawn attacked. I mean, maybe black can play f6, give the rook, and then like go for counterplay. Here, Here it's very close to force mate. I'm calculating queen takes and then king d6 and then queen e6 and then king will run. I don't see force mate though. But yeah, let's start by taking. And I think what I'll do is after king d6, I'll play queen e6, and then I'll just look to. Wait a minute, I was gonna say I'll look to take the knight, but the knight's defended, so let me be a little bit careful here. Almost had a moment of like actual oh no my queen. Yeah, maybe I'll just look to keep checking the king. Queen c6. Of course, black is threatening queen f2. Like after king b4, black is threatening mate in 2. With queen f2, king d1, knight e3 would be checkmate. Because the rook pins a pawn on the d file. But I have the initiative. I'm the one attacking black's king. And it looks like I can just play a3 here. If the king moves to a5, queen a6 will be checkmate. And the only other legal move is king b3. After which I'm pretty sure I see mate in 2 with bishop a4, queen takes a4, and then queen c3 checkmate. Just double checking here, but yeah, this is going to be a nice finish. Bishop a4. The queen supports the bishop. Black's only legal move is to take. And then queen c3. Okay, so that was a pretty extraordinary opening. Like, not every day you can checkmate the opponent's king on b3 when you're white in the first within the first 20 moves. But I do want to go back and explain the lines in this variation because there is a lot to address. I mean, starting with knight g5, like in this position, the main line and the line that most grandmasters play is knight a5, and this is probably the most reputable, but also the most theoretical. The fried liver, at least the main line of fried liver, is after knight takes d5, and this is known to not be so great for black because of knight takes f7, king takes f7, queen f3. I don't think I've had this exact position in a speed run just yet, but I've definitely shown it before at least once. The idea is that, yeah, the knight's attacked, the king's attacked, knight can't block because there's a pin. The best move for black is to move forward, but then the king's a big target. White can pile on the pressure, and yeah, white's definitely for choice from this position. So let me explain knight to d4, because this is a really tricky line that will basically trap a lot of amateur players, because it looks very attractive for white to play d6 in this position, unleashing the bishop and targeting f7. But this is actually the beginning of just walking into a really nasty line, because black can take on d6 with the queen, and if white takes on f7 with a fork, it looks good for white, but black has queen c6 counterattacking the bishop and the pawn, and I'm pretty sure there's been tens of thousands of games that have gone knight takes rook, and then queen takes g2, not taking the bishop, but taking the pawn, because now the rook is almost trapped. And after rook f1, there's queen e4, almost checkmate. If the queen blocks, the queen is lost. And if the bishop blocks, then knight f3 is smothered mate. So I've had this position online probably at least a few times. I haven't played this line in a while, though, from the black side. And it's a line that objectively is dubious for black because of the c3 move. And unfortunately for my opponent, I knew this move. They responded in the best fashion by playing b5. And yeah, the only move to keep the advantage here for white is bishop f1. I should explain bishop d3 runs into bishop f5, which is a nice kind of counterattack, because if takes, black is doing fine. And if takes, then takes, black is also doing fine. So bishop f1 just ensures knight's still attacked. And yeah, the best move here for black is actually not to move the knight, but to take on d5, counterattacking this knight. And yeah, there was some Fischer game that went like takes and then takes and then takes and then king d8 and then castle. And I'm pretty sure Fischer was white. He played queen f3. His opponent took the pawn, and then Fischer took on f7. I may have mixed up the move order, but yeah, if you look it up in like online, like how Fischer lost in less than 15 moves, I'm sure the game will come up. And the winning move from Black in this position is actually pretty incredible. If you want to pause the video and try and find it, feel free to do so. There's only one winning move for Black, and that is knight to f6, with the idea that Black is preventing White from delivering mate on e8 or d7. At the same time, g2 is attacked, and not only is g2 attacked, but Black is also threatening bishop d5 to trap the queen. So it's an incredible multi-purpose move. Basically, there's at least 4 or 5 purposes with this move, between defending these squares, threatening mate, and clearing the d5 square for the bishop. So yeah, Fischer was a victim to this line. If White is prepared here, of course, White should not take on f7 after d3. White's doing quite well. So it's a useful line to be aware of if you play this from the white side. But going back to the game, I think after bishop g4 and f3, I was just in the driver's seat, and yeah, things just kind of spiraled downwards for Black in the game. So hopefully a bunch of lessons to take away from that first one. Let's move on. Let's do at least one more and play a new 10-minute game. Playing Pickle. So 2 out of 2 opponents today named after food. We had Cookie and Pickle. So this time we have a London opening. I will play knight f6. And against a London, I like to play kind of a reverse Queen's Gambit, early c5 and knight c6. White's very quickly building the triangle formation. Now, against this specific setup, the move that I really enjoy going for is queen to b6. And this takes advantage of the fact that the b-pawn is not defended by the c1 bishop, induces White to play b3. So yeah, it's still solid for White, but I'm definitely getting some nice active play. And here I would like to play e6 and complete my kingside development, but I should definitely first develop this bishop. I'm debating between bishop f5 or bishop g4. I think both moves are very playable. I'll play bishop g4, a little bit more aggressive, pinning the knight to the queen. White plays h3. Let's maintain the pin. I'll be okay if g4 and bishop g6. And the plan going forward from here is, is just to be solid. Pawn e6, bishop e7, castling, rook c8. Still a matter of getting the pieces to happy squares. Now, I guess it is a question if I want to throw in the capture, like pawn takes pawn. Because it's very common that Black will play this move eventually, but I think in this position there's no reason to do so right away. So I'll start with bishop e7. If White takes, then I don't mind taking back, and then I'll have 2 center pawns against 1 center pawn. White plays queen c2. Okay, so forming the battery. I mean, I can still castle and the knight will help defend h7. But with this move queen c2, I think it makes rook c8 a bit more attractive. Yeah, I'll start with this move. Because very often, the rook likes to be on files that are likely to open, and the c file is the most likely file to open because of the pawn tension. But rooks also like to be aligned with opponent's queen or king, in this case, yeah, aligning with the queen. And there might be ideas of taking and then knight b4 with some pin and fork. So yeah, bishop g5 doesn't scare me too much. I'm going to start by taking here. And if this pawn recaptures, then knight b4 could be a real possibility. It would be interesting if the c-pawn recaptures, because then knight b4 would be a blunder due to queen takes c8. Nothing's defending the rook. So then I might look to castle. Although I do have to be careful with castling. Let's say like pawn takes pawn and I castle, then there's takes and I lose h7. White taking on d4 with a knight. Okay, so yeah, there's some choices here. I mean, knight b4, it's a fancy move, attacking the queen and the bishop and unleashing the pin. I think after knight b4, white would have to play queen b1. And then I can take on c3. So that actually looks really, really nice. There's other options here too, like I could play e5 and expand the center. Although e5 might allow knight f5 and then things got a bit murky. I really like the look of knight b4. Because the queen is basically tied down to the bishop and the pawn. Like it's only defender of both d3 and c3. And it's going to have to probably just move back to b1 and surrender c3. Now it is possible white might get some counterplay, like assuming queen b1, rook takes c3. White will have the move bishop b5 check. And then I might consider just moving the king to f8. But yeah, let's go ahead and take the pawn. And I guess this is the downside of white having played b3 earlier. Like b3, it just weakened the position a little bit. And yeah, the queen side for white is crumbling. Now in this position, it might seem automatic just to recapture on f6. I'll admit I was pretty close to just like immediately playing bishop takes f6. But there's a stronger move here because I can take on d3 with check. And yeah, this wins material. I mean, if queen takes, I'll take back with rook. Otherwise, king f1. And then I'll take back with the bishop. And black will be up a minor piece and a pawn. So this is a nice example of how to basically crack the London from early on. Induced some weakness on the queen side. And yeah, white is really just crumbling here. Now the rook's attacked. If I move the rook, I lose a knight. But I can take the knight, which will simplify. And now, I mean, there's a bunch of options here. I could castle, just leave the knight and rook in white's territory. I like the looks of queen a6, simply reinforcing the knight and aligning with the white king. And if the king wants to get off this diagonal, then it'll have to move here. King d1 walks into the fork. King f3 really walks out into the open. And maybe it's the best move, though. Oh, king d1 also walks into rook c1. So white is leaving the king on e2. Now I'm pretty sure there's checkmate in 2 here. I'm pretty sure there's actually a couple of moves to mate in 2. There's knight f4, which is double check. And then whatever white does, there's queen e2 checkmate. But even more stylish is knight c1. I think I'll play this move. It doesn't really make a difference. Because the rook is unleashed, the king can't move up. The king's in double check. And yeah, queen e2 is checkmate. So a very strange configuration of pieces. The rook defends the knight, defends the queen, checkmates the king. Not a mating pattern that you see every day, but a very nice way to punish the London opening. And yeah, my opponent made just some subtle mistake early on. Maybe playing b3 combined with queen c2 allowed me to put on the pressure. And then I think here white already had to be aware of the danger. Like maybe a move like a3 just to prevent knight b4. Engine saying this move is best just to take and yeah, avoid basically what happened in the game. But after bishop g5, yeah, this knight b4 move is very troublesome for white. And here, yeah, white should probably play bishop b5 check to save the bishop, get some initiative. I was probably going to play king f8 and yeah, lose castling rights, but still have a very nice grip on the queen side. Move like a6 is coming. So definitely a feel-good game. Hopefully some lessons for viewers to take away from that game. Let's move on. Let's do one more. Rated 1220. And this time I have an opponent that's not named after food. We have E. Miller. And E. Miller is playing the Polish opening, which is not an opening I've encountered in the speedrun. This is also known as a orangutan, which, yeah, it's definitely a non-traditional opening. Now, against the Polish or the orangutan, what I like to recommend is just taking the pawn if white allows it. And even though I'm allowing the trade of wing pawn for center pawn, okay, white doesn't even take the center pawn, so I'm just happy to win a pawn here. I was going to say, if white did take the center pawn, I would develop and get initiative on the bishop. I can definitely elaborate after this game is over. But yeah, white, I guess, is playing some gambit here. Down a pawn, but trying to attack the center. So I think the strategy is just to be solid. Like, let's defend and prepare to develop the final minor pieces. Pawn c4, okay. It's grabbing some space. I'll keep developing. I'm not really too concerned of a3. I just drop the bishop back. White doesn't have a b-pawn to expand with to keep attacking my bishop. And the bishop actually serves a nice role in pinning this pawn. Like, white can't easily expand with d4. Maybe white has to look to castle first or look to play this move first. So yeah, let's just complete development with castling. And then likely developing the bishop to one of these squares next. I'm not actually sure which move is best. And there's definitely an argument for all of these bishop moves. I mean, bishop e6 is like the most centralized. Bishop f5 does kind of pierce through the position. Bishop g4 might induce some trades. I'm considering holding off on developing the bishop too. Like, one move that comes to mind is pawn e4. Simply attacking the knight. And sometimes a move like this is a bit overextending, but in this case, if the knight moves here, then I can easily defend the pawn and look to play h6. If knight moves here, I'd be really happy to take and double white's pawns. So yeah, I'm going to hold off on developing my bishop and just grab space in the center. Sometimes if you're not sure whether to push the pawn, you just want to ask yourself if you have enough ways to defend the pawn if it gets attacked later. I have a lot of ways to reinforce it. But yeah, like I was saying, I'll just take on d4, doubling white's pawns. And now, I guess it's still a question, like, do I want to develop immediately? I probably do. Bishop f5, nice move to support the pawn. And one plan going forward is this bishop, it's a bit out of play. I don't really want to take on c3 and give white the bishop pair. So there's a plan here to play c6, eventually d5 and bishop c7, and have the bishop on a really nice diagonal aimed at white's king side. So yeah, I'll start with c6. And if I get in this move d5, I'll have the really nice pawn structure, and then I'll be pretty well set up to try and organize an attack against white's king side. Have basically all the minor pieces aimed over there. And there is a general rule. If you're black and you have a pawn on e4 that's well defended and the opponent's castled, then you want to look to attack the opponent's castled king. So white is attacking the pawn. I don't think white is actually threatening to take the pawn, though, because I'll have rook b8 to then win the bishop. So maybe I can set up some trap here, like bishop c7 to start. Yeah, let's play bishop c7. Very sneaky move. Of course, going for my plan of d5, unleashing the bishop. But I'm also basically saying, oh no, my pawn. Someone call an ambulance. But if white takes the pawn, that ambulance will not be for me. Because yeah, rook b8. White could then win one of these pawns, but then I'll win the bishop. Maybe white could consider playing d5. Okay, rook b1, so white was seeing through my trickery, defending the bishop and maybe preparing to take on b7. Now with rook b1, it is aligned with my bishop on f5. So this move is really tempting. Pawn e3. I don't actually know if it does that much. Like pawn e3, rook d1, we could trade. I feel like I'm only helping white with that sequence. I'm considering this move to unleash and then maybe eventually queen d6. I'm also considering rook b8 just to safely reinforce the pawn. So definitely a few options to consider here. I really don't think that e3 does that much. Like rook d1, if I take on f2, rook takes and f-file opens in white's favor. So I think it's really a matter between d5 and rook b8. And I'm just going to play rook b8 because I didn't really want to calculate the lines where I sacrifice a pawn on b7. It's just a solid, safe move and looking to play d5 next move. And then hopefully shift the focus to the king side. And I'm also just preserving this e3 move for maybe later when it can be more venomous to hit the rook. Like maybe if this rook moves, then e3 will actually have the threat of taking on f2. Now white putting the bishop in the corner. I mean, this does create the battery, but white's not really threatening to take on b7. So I'll play pawn d5. I should note here the pawn's defended 3 times, so it's okay that there's 3 attackers. Take back and pawn is still defended. Oh, except, yeah, maybe white miscounted because now I can take the knight. And yeah, generally when there's the same number of defenders as there are attackers, then yeah, then it's sufficiently defended. I think my opponent's realizing that now. The queen should not continue to capture on d5. White does have the battery, but yeah, now it's time to save the knight. Or is it? Because there's a move like queen h4 threatening checkmate or queen d6 threatening checkmate. There's also knight f4 just migrating to the king side. Yeah, let's go for knight f4. The basic moves to threaten checkmate would probably walk into g3. And I want to make it so that, yeah, I'm just attacking with all the pieces. And this knight on f4 is a great attacking piece. Now, I do have to watch out for this queen-bishop battery. Like, it can be very easy to miss the bishop in the corner or just forget about the bishop in the corner. And if white plays d5 next, then it would be a mate threat. But white's not threatening that right away. I'm drawn to this move knight e2. Of course, the bishop's covering e2, so I would have to remove the bishop. I think I'll just go for queen g5. Not only attacking, but preemptively defending g7. think white is likely to play pawn g3 here. Queen g3 would walk into knight e2, the discovered fork, basically double attacking the queen and checking the king. So g3 we do see. And still not super easy to crack. Knight e2 is still off limits. Knight h3 is possible. I think I will play knight h3. Attacking the king, I'll force a king to g2 or h1. And then, yeah, this move bishop g4 actually looks really, really nice. Setting up bishop to f3. I just have a lot of attackers on the king side with the bishop, the knight, the queen. This bishop's not playing a big role, but maybe will be useful in the future. The threat in this position is bishop f3. Then if king takes knight, it will be checkmate. The only other option would be to lose the queen for white. I'm also realizing I might be setting up knight f4. After g takes f4, there's a double check, which would result in checkmate. So it's not easy for white to defend there. Yeah, rook e1, and now I have the choice between knight f4 or bishop f3. Let's play bishop f3, because the most straightforward. And white has two legal moves, one of which loses a queen, the other one, yeah, gets mated. So pretty nice game. Yeah, it was first time taking down the Polish opening. I should explain kind of the opening strategy, because a lot of players just don't know any sort of opening theory or opening preparation against b4 on move 1. And I'll admit that the only true line I know against this is to play this, and then after bishop b2, black is supposed to take the pawn. Now, most players would take on e5. And the reason why black is okay trading off a center pawn for a wing pawn early in the game, I should note that usually center pawns are just more valuable than wing pawns early in the game. But in this case, black gets an early lead in development, knight f6, already preparing to castle. And then going forward, black can play knight c6, gaining time on the bishop. And the fact that white has two center pawns, it's nice in some respect, but it's even nicer for black to get the early lead in development, to have the half-woven e-file for the rook. Yeah, rook e8 could also attack the bishop on e5, and black will eventually play d5 and develop. And yeah, the engine already slightly prefers black in this position. Of course, what happened in the game, my opponent just gave the pawn without recapturing. I was up material basically the full game. And yeah, this e4 move was nice to gain space. Yeah, there's some interesting moments on the queen side. And I mean, my opponent just gave the piece, maybe miscounting the number of attackers and defenders on d5. So pretty clean game. Again, hopefully some lessons to take away. I think we'll end it there for episode 23. If you have questions, leave them below. I do appreciate everyone who likes and subscribes. It does help the channel grow. And stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys soon.